Okay, in this video we're going to look at the biology topic. So the first thing we covered was the idea of variation. So in all living things there is variation. So you look slightly different to your parents and your parents look different to their parents. And this is a result of variation. Let's see how variation happens. So uh, we have a sperm here and this is the egg. And in the sperm we have 23 chromosomes, and you get those 23 chromosomes or bundles of DNA from your father, and in the egg cell you get 23 chromosomes from your mother. When they come together and fertilize, you end up with an embryo cell with a total of 46 chromosomes. Okay. Now, depending on which genes you inherit from your father and your mother, you'll get a different um, genetic makeup in the embryo. Okay, so you might inherit the gene for blue eyes or the gene for brown eyes. So there's going to be variation within you. So you're not going to be exactly the same as your father or your mother because you're getting some DNA from your father and some from your mother. So let's look at the chromosome in more detail. So here's a chromosome, which is a bundle of DNA. And we have 46 chromosomes in a human being. If it's a sperm cell, there's only 23, and an egg cell, only 23. A little section like this of the chromosome we call a gene. And this gene codes for certain characteristics in living things. So this might be the gene for blue eyes, or might be the gene for brown hair. And we've many tens of thousands of these genes all located along the length of the chromosome in the DNA. And these give us all the different characteristics we have. We've got two different types of gene. We have dominant genes, and we also have recessive genes. Okay, so let's look at an example of the inheritance of dominant and recessive genes. So let's say your father has the genotype capital T, small t. Okay, and let's say that the capital T stands for tall, and the small t means not tall. If it's a capital letter, that means it's a dominant gene, and if it's a small letter, that is a recessive gene. Now in this case, the father here is going to be a tall person because he has a dominant gene for being tall. And whenever you have the dominant gene for something, you always express that gene. In order to express a recessive gene, you need to have two copies of the recessive gene. So if someone was to be short, they'd have to have this genotype, two small t's. Now let's say the father then decides to have a child with his wife. So, and the wife has a different genotype. Let's say she has this genotype, two small t's. So she's a short woman and he's a tall man. So if we want to figure out what the genotype of all the kids will be, we draw a little square like this. And at the top we put the father's genotype, so the capital T and the small t. Along the side we put the two small t's for the mom. And then we just times those letters. So small t by capital T would be capital T, small t. Then small t by small t is two small t's. And then we do that one and the last one. Now we can see from this diagram that in this case they would expect to have 50% of their children to be tall because 50% will have a dominant gene for being tall, but they'd expect 50% of their children to be short because they've inherited two copies of the recessive gene. Whenever you've got two copies of the recessive gene, you always express that gene. Okay, so this is how variation happens. It's due to the fact that we have a cross between different genes from your mother and your father. Okay, now let's look at something else. Let's look at cloning. Okay, so in this case we have genetic variation, but in cloning there is no variation. So let's look at how cloning happens. So if you want to clone an adult, the first thing you've got to do is take one of the body cells from the adult, and you get the nucleus here, and the nucleus contains the DNA. So you want to take out that nucleus, here it is, containing the adult's DNA, and that is the full 46 chromosomes of the adult. And then you take an egg cell, and you take the nucleus from that egg cell, and you basically put it into a bin, okay, because you just want an empty egg cell. And then you take the nucleus from the body cell you want to clone, and you put it in to the empty egg cell, and now you give it a little electric shock, and this electric shock fools the egg into thinking it's been fertilized, okay, and then it will start to divide into an embryo, okay, and this embryo will have exactly the same genetic makeup as the DNA in the nucleus from that body cell you're cloning. So the baby that's born will be identical to the person who you got the cell from in the first place. And that's basically how you clone an adult. Now there's another type of cloning which is even easier. You can take an embryo when it's only just got a few cells, like so, and you can take one of those cells and let it divide separately into a new embryo. Or you can even take another of those cells and separate it off, and that could divide into a new embryo. And since all of those cells have the same DNA, all of these embryos will grow into identical copies of the animal. Okay, so the next thing we're going to look at, if I can remember, is let's go back and say, because I've forgotten. Oh, Darwin's theory of evolution. Okay, let's see if I can get back into this. Okay, Darwin's theory of evolution. So the theory of evolution states that modern animals and plants, so modern organisms, have evolved from simpler ones over millions of years. Okay, so the main point here is that evolution takes a very, very long time. It doesn't happen overnight. And Charles Darwin was the person, the scientist, who came up with the theory of evolution and how he thought it could happen. And his idea was quite simple, and his idea was that there is variation amongst all living things. So just like in our class, you have some people who are black, some people are white, some people are tall, some people are short, some people have blue eyes or brown eyes. In any population, there's going to be some little differences. Okay. Now let's say you are a moth. Okay, and let's say you are a white moth, and because you're a very pale sort of color, you blend in very easily with the white rocks that are around you, so the birds can't attack and eat you. So this is really good camouflage. But let's imagine somebody opened a factory near where you live, and lots of soot ended up going all over your environment, so everything became black. And now all of a sudden here you are, being a white moth. Well, it's going to be very easy for the bird to see you against the black background. Okay, so the bird is going to come along and he's going to eat up all the white moths. But just because there's variation in every population, not every single white moth is going to actually be white. Once in a while, a moth will be born that's black, just due to a mutation. Okay, and in this case, it's a very beneficial mutation because the black moth will blend in against the background here and not be eaten by the birds. Okay, so eventually you'll have a situation where all the white moths are being eaten, and the only moth that can survive is the black moth. And he goes on and he has children, and some of those children are also black moths because some of them have inherited the gene for having black wings. And since the black moths are the only ones that can survive, and they're the only ones who can go on and produce children and pass their genes on, eventually, with all the white moths being eaten, it's only the black moths that survive. So you come back in 100 years, you'll find in this area all the moths have evolved from being white into black. Okay, so that's basically how evolution happens. It's called evolution by natural selection. So in this case, the black moths are being selected because they're the ones best able to blend into the background and not get eaten. Okay, so that's evolution. Let's look at what else there was. Selective breeding. Okay, let's do this. So in selective breeding, this is where this is like an artificial form of natural selection. Okay, so in this case, if you want to have a dog that is very aggressive, you'll take all the little puppies. So you've got three puppies, A, B, and C, and you'll choose the most aggressive dog out of those three. Let's say it's B is the most aggressive. So you will breed this dog with another aggressive dog in order to produce puppies D, E, and F. And of those puppies, let's say these two, you again choose the most aggressive and you breed them together. And of those puppies, you take the most aggressive, and so on and so forth through the generations. And so you're selecting, this is not natural selection, this is artificial selecting. You're selecting, if in this case, to find the most aggressive dog. And so generation after generation, you end up with dogs that are more and more and more aggressive. And you can do this with any trait. So you might want a cuddly dog, or a passive dog, or a good guard dog, or a good sniffer dog. So whatever it is you want in the dog to keep, you just make sure to select for that trait. Okay, and that is pretty much it for biology.